Hello guys, welcome to the first episode of this series where I will be talking about suspense and lazy in React. This is a rather advanced topic targeted at people who already have some experience developing React applications. So if you have been, following my videos about React on my channel, or if you have been developing applications with React for, I would say, 2 years, over 2 years, this tutorial is going to be very helpful for you because in this tutorial I'm going to talk about using suspense and lazy, especially when your application needs to communicate with a backend API and you want to keep the application responsive and you want to load components only when they're needed. So yeah, this is a rather advanced topic, but if you are new to React, I think watching the tutorial would also help because you will see some code, right? And you will be introduced to this topic. At least that will give you some rough idea of what suspense and lazy is, even though you might, sometimes struggle with the concepts that we are uh, talking about, like for example communicating with backend APIs. And of course, if you want to learn any of those topics, like for example integrating with a backend API, there are videos on my channel that you can watch. So anyway, let's talk about this. This is going to be a tutorial of 3 episodes. As you can see, I've got my notes here, I've got my VS Code here, and I've got this sample application running using Vite. You see the output of the application here. I'm going to create branches for each episode. Right now I am on main branch, and then I do not have any particular code in the application. I have just set up the application, so we will take everything step by step, and I'm going to show you how to work with lazy and suspense. So let's talk about React suspense and React lazy. And I think I would like to zoom in a little bit so that you guys better see the note. So yeah, React lazy, React suspense, using a real scenario, building a real application with one entity called book, and of course using Vite. So React lazy and React suspense, let's talk about them to understand what they are and when we need to use them. Then we are going to set up the application. We are going to create components for a single entity called book, and we are going to apply lazy loading and suspense to load components efficiently. And I'm gonna walk you through every single step of the process. So episode number 1, developing the application using local data. So right now we are not going to fetch our data from a backend API. Everything is going to be local inside of our application. This will make the whole process easier to understand. But first, let's talk about React.lazy and suspense. So React.lazy allows you to load React components dynamically. Dynamically means only when they are needed instead of loading everything at once. So without React.lazy, your components will be loaded when the application runs. And this will sometimes increase the load time, initial load time. But with React.lazy, you will be able to load components only when they are needed. This helps with code splitting, which is something that we will cover later as well. And of course, it will lead to faster initial load times. Suspense, which is related to React lazy, lets you show a fallback UI, like a spinner or a loading message, while waiting for a lazy loaded component to finish loading. So if you've got a component that, for example, takes a lot of time to load because it is going to integrate with, I don't know, like an API, you want to probably show the user something like a spinner to indicate that the application is doing some work, it is loading, so you need to wait for a couple of moments. So that is a fallback UI. Suspense allows you to show a fallback UI. there is another tutorial on my channel about using error boundaries. So in that tutorial, I have also talked about fallback UIs. In that case, I mean, when you are using error boundaries, when a component crashes or when a component encounters some error, right, you would like to indicate that to the user by showing some fallback UI instead of crashing the whole application. So error boundaries help you do that. If you want to learn error boundaries, if you want to learn, about error boundaries and how to implement them in React applications, I'd recommend taking a look at that, course, that tutorial as well. You can find it easily. I'm probably going to put the link in the description of this video as well. Let's talk about code splitting, and then I will take you to VS Code because I know that you are probably interested in seeing some code in action to see what we are going to do. So let me see if I can close these. Okay. So code splitting is a technique that breaks your JavaScript bundle into smaller chunks that are loaded on demand, right? Instead of loading the entire application up front. So that helps with faster load times, right? It reduces initial load time. It improves performance on slower devices or network. For example, when you are on a slow 3G network, for example, and it loads only what the user actually needs when they need it. So this is going to be very helpful, right? Because using, code splitting, you can control your application, especially if you've got large components. You can split the code, the JavaScript bundle, into smaller chunks and only load the parts of the code that you absolutely need instead of loading everything upfront. Why are we going to use, code splits or code splitting? So imagine your app has many big components or pages, and the user only visits some of them, not all of them. With React.lazy, with Suspense, and all the other techniques that you're going to learn in this tutorial, you load only what's needed. And with Suspense, you keep the user informed with a loading state while waiting for that component to load. So when you combine React.lazy and Suspense, with React.lazy, you load your components dynamically only when you actually need them, right? And with Suspense, you indicate this to the user by, for example, showing a fallback UI. You are telling your user that this is going to take the application, a while to load, so please be patient, and something is happening and you will see some results soon. Now, we are going to create an application. I have already done so, by the way. We're going to use Vite with React to, create this application. It is called Book App, and we're going to have a single entity called Book. The data that we are going to work with in this episode is local to the application. It means that we are going to have an array of books and we're going to show them to the user. But in future episodes, in episode 2 and 3, we are going to remove that local data and we are going to fetch our data from our backend API. So if you're a React developer, you are no doubt familiar with what we are doing here. We are creating a React application using Vite, and then we are installing the dependencies, and then we are running the application. This is something I've done here. So I've got my application and I am running the application on my local machine. This is the application, which will, of course, we will change this, right? We will start adding new features. So let's get started. The first thing that we are going to do is to create two components, book list and book details. So book list will be responsible for showing a list of books, and book details will be responsible for showing the details of a single book. And the idea is that we are going to show a list of books, and then for the details of each single book, we are going to lazy load that book details component. We're not going to load the book details component up front. We are going to dynamically load it. We are going to load it only when we need it using React.lazy, right? So let's see how we can achieve this. I'm going to zoom out a little bit and I'm going to show you the code, and we're going to write this in VS Code, of course. as you can see, we have this book list component, right? It is a very simple component. It is taking in this unselect book as prop. So we've got this local, array, which we are going to replace in future episodes with some data coming from our backend. And then, as you can see here, I am mapping through that array. And for each item inside of that array, I am rendering a button inside of my list item, right? And in that, button, I am kind of binding the onClick event to the prop that I am going to take in here, this function. And I am passing the ID of the book. And of course, in the button itself, the content of the button is going to be the title of the book. So as you can see, each book has an ID and a title. So we're going to use the ID probably to show the details of a book, and we are going to use the title for now in the button itself. So I'm going to take you to VS Code now to create this component. I'm going to create this components folder, and inside of these components, I'm going to create this book list.jsx, right? And I'm going to write the code for this book component, book list component. I'm going to use state, and this is a function component. Unselect book is going to be the prop. Then I'm going to need my array. My array has 3 elements, ID and title for each book. Right now I've got 3 books. And then I am going to return this markup. So I am going to map through the books. And for each book, I'm going to render a button. And the onClick event on that button is going to be connected to that prop that we are going to take in from our parent component. And you will see what I mean by parent component in a minute. And I am going to pass the ID of the book, right, to that, prop. So let me save this. And what I want to do is snooze my code completions for now. Now let's continue with the note. The next step is to create the book details component. The book details is going to be loaded in a lazy manner. So we're going to lazy load this. So take a look here. For each ID of the book, here we've got the title, we've got the author, and we've got the year of probably the year of publication, probably, or publication year. And then we are going to take in the ID of a book. And then, as you can see here, we want to pass in the ID of the book to this book details object, and we are going to extract one single book. And then we are going to say, you know what, if we can't find the book in that, object, we are going to say we couldn't find the book. Otherwise, we are going to show the title, the author, and the year of that book. So if, for example, the ID that comes into this component is number 1, we are going to put number 1 inside of this object, and we're going to extract, for example, the first one, and then the title, the author, and the year will be printed out. If we get an ID that doesn't exist, for example, 100, we will print out this, paragraph tag in the component. So let's go to VS Code and create this book details component now. So book details, JSX, and I'm going to write the code for this one. So book details, it's going to be an object with the details of the books. Each book detail will have the title, the author, the year, and then the key of that book, of course. And then what we are going to do is to create the component itself. We are going to take in the book ID. We're going to select that book from the object above. If it doesn't exist, print out this p tag. Otherwise, print out the title, the author, and the year of that book. And that's it. So let me save this. I'm going to close this as well. Let's continue with the notes now. The next step is to update our app.jsx because of course we want to use these two components, the book list and the book details. So take a look here. This is, I think, where the magic is happening. We are using Suspense and Lazy from React next to useState, right? And then take a look here. We are lazy loading the book details component. Take a look at the syntax. We're saying, lazy import and then the path to the component file without, of course, the extension book details. And now we have this book details component, which is going to be loaded in a lazy, manner. And then we have, some run-of-the-mill app component. For example, we have the state, set selected book ID, whether we have a selected book ID or not. Of course, we are going to show the book list component in a normal, way without loading it in a lazy manner. And if you remember, the book list had a prop, unselect book. And for unselect book, we are going to pass in this set selected book ID, this state right here. And then this is the beauty of using Suspense. Remember, we do not want to load the details of a book upfront. We want to show the book details component only when we need it. So Suspense will first show like a fallback UI when the book details is not needed or when it is loading, let's say. We are going to surround the book details component. This book details is actually the one that we've got here, right? Here. The book details is this, right? So this is the book details. The lazy version of the book details component, it needs a book ID, the ID of the book we want to show the details for. We're going to surround it with Suspense. We're going to set this fallback on the Suspense to tell Suspense that when the component is loading, maybe we are fetching the details of a book from a backend API. When it is loading, show this, markup to the user. So loading more details, right? And when it is ready, so take a look at the selected book ID state. If there is a value inside of this, render the book details, right? And pass in that value to the book ID so that this component loads up. And if you remember the book details, here is the book details. When there is some book ID, it's going to render this part, or if the book ID doesn't exist, it's going to render this paragraph tag. So let me go ahead and write the code inside of app.jsx. So I'm going to navigate to app.jsx, right? And I'm going to remove this and I'm going to write the code for app.jsx. We're going to load Suspense and Lazy, import them actually. We're going to import the book list component. First, let's create a lazy version of the book details and then write the app component itself. So what we are going to do is to create one state and then the book list component, and then we are going to render a fallback UI while the book details is loading. And if there is a selected book ID, let's render the lazy version of book details with that book ID in there. So this is the application that we've got right now. This is the app.jsx, right? So right now, as you can see, we've got the book list. This is the book list, but we do not have the book details because we are loading book details in a lazy manner. And of course, when we need, book details, because it's going to take us a bit of time to load this component, we are going to show a fallback UI. So, but when we click this, right? When we click this, if you remember, the book list had a button. So these are the buttons. These are all the buttons. So the buttons have this event controlled, let's say, by this prop. So when we click on that button, we are actually using this, right, with the book ID. And inside of the app.jsx, we are passing the state, the set book ID, right? The set book ID, this one, to that event handler, to that prop for book list. So basically, using the book list component, which is of course this component, whenever you click on that button, you are setting the ID of that selected book to this local state for the application component or app component. And when there is a value inside of this, as you can see, we are going to load the details of that book, right? So let's see what happens if I click this. Because everything is running locally on my machine, I think we will not be able to see this fallback UI unless we, kind of use network throttling. But if I click this, I think you saw for a second that the component, while it was loading up, we saw this loading book details. But let me do something. I'm going to go to my network tab, and I'm going to go to 3G. I was using network throttling before. So, yeah. Now, what I am going to do is to click on one of these books, and I want you to take a look here. You are going to see this fallback UI for a couple of probably seconds, and then you will see the details of that book loaded. So I'm going to click this. You saw the loading book details. Let me refresh. Yeah, I think you saw it. So if you, pause the video, you can easily see that loading book details fallback UI. So right now we have achieved a very simple setup, combining lazy components with Suspense to load the details of a book, right, using Suspense, and also to load the book details component in a lazy manner without loading it up front, because the user will probably not need this. The user will probably only, interact with these, buttons, or probably only look at these buttons. But if the user is interested in seeing the details of, let's say, a book by clicking on one of these buttons, only then we are going to load that component. So let's get back to the notes. We can study these to kind of better understand what's happening. So React.lazy, as I told you, it tells React to dynamically import the book details component only when it is actually rendered. Suspense and the fallback wraps the lazy component and displays the fallback UI while it loads. When you click a book title, selected book ID updates and the book details is rendered. Lazy loaded, right? Showing the details after loading, of course. What happens in the background? With lazy loading, your entire app bundle will include both book list and book details without lazy loading. So your app bundle will include these two components. With lazy loading, Vita and React split book details into a separate chunk. Do you remember we talked about code splitting? So on initial load, the app fetches only the main chunk, including the book list, because we are showing the book list on app.jsx component. When you click on a book, the chunk for book details is fetched asynchronously. So you are being very performant in terms of loading components dynamically, while fetching the Suspense fallback displays. After loading, React renders book details. So this is what we talked about here. We talked about lazy Suspense and the benefit, smaller initial bundle because of the code splitting technique, faster page load, and better user experience, of course, especially when your component is complex and it takes a lot of time for the application to load that component. But we're not finished yet, right? So this was just the beginning. Now the next step would be to actually communicate with a backend API, which is supposed to be slow, right? So right now, the data that we have inside of our application are local data. So everything are inside of the application, like local arrays of books. But in real applications, more often than not, you're going to fetch your data from a backend API. Stay tuned in the next video. because I am going to show you how you can communicate with a backend API to fetch the details of a book using Suspense and Lazy. I hope you've already enjoyed watching this episode, and if that's the case, as always, I'd really appreciate it if you could give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who is learning about React. And stay tuned for the future episodes as well. Until then, take care.